Have you ever felt overwhelmed by worries that seem endless, as if every problem keeps growing larger and heavier, preventing you from moving forward? Life can be filled with challenges that cloud our vision, making us forget that there is someone greater than any difficulty. But what if you could change your focus? What if, instead of looking at the size of your problems, you saw the greatness of God, ready to help you? Imagine living with the confidence that God is in control of every situation, that your worries are in His hands, and that He will solve everything in His perfect timing. In this message, you'll discover how to free your mind from anxiety and turn your focus toward God, who is capable of transforming any circumstance. It's time to stop worrying and rest in the certainty that God is greater than your problems. Before we begin, I want to invite you to leave a comment with this faith statement. I trust in God. He will resolve everything. Share these words and let them be a beacon of hope for others who need this message too. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe and activate the notifications so that YouTube can alert you when we upload a new video. Let's begin. 1. Holding hands with God. Don't be afraid. He is helping you. Do you know what is most beautiful about Isaiah 41:13? It's that clear and powerful image of God holding our hand. Stop for a moment and think about that. It's not just a poetic idea, it's a real promise. God says, I am your God who holds your right hand and tells you, do not fear, I will help you. Can you feel it? That warmth, that sense of security, knowing that no matter what is happening, you're not walking alone. Life hits us hard. There are times when we feel like everything around us is shaking. Maybe you're facing a problem at work, in your family, or even deep inside you, the fear that settles in your chest. That voice whispering you can't do it, that you won't make it. It's a human feeling, right? We all face it at some point. But here's the key. God knows. He understands our fears. And instead of rebuking us, He extends His hand to us. When God speaks of holding our right hand, it's not a symbolic, empty gesture. Think of when a father holds his little child's hand to cross the street. No matter how scared that child is, as long as their hand is in their father's, they feel safe. That's how God is with you. He doesn't tell you not to fear because it's something bad, but because He is there holding you, guiding you. His hand doesn't just lead you, it stabilizes you when you feel like you might fall. That phrase, do not fear, has a power that we often underestimate. It's more than just a suggestion. It's a command filled with love. It's like God is saying, look at me, I'm here. There's nothing to fear. When we understand that the God who created the universe is actively involved in our lives, any problem, no matter how big, fades in comparison to His greatness. And the best part, He doesn't just promise to be present, He helps us. Can you imagine that? He's not a distant God who only watches from afar. He's a God who intervenes, who acts. His help is like that friend who arrives just in time to hold you when you feel everything is falling apart. It's practical, direct, and tailored to what you really need. Not always what we want, but exactly what our soul requires. It's natural to feel fear. Admitting it doesn't make us weak. On the contrary, it makes us human. But here's the twist. When we recognize our fears, we make space for God to act. By taking His hand, our perspective changes. What once seemed insurmountable becomes manageable. Not because we're suddenly stronger, but because He is strengthening us. Imagine someone facing a crucial decision. Maybe it's a career change, a family crisis, or even an internal struggle. That person feels overwhelmed, unable to see a way out. But one night, they open their Bible and read Isaiah. They close their eyes and visualize God holding their hand. That image changes everything. It's not that the problems disappear magically, but there is a peace, a certainty that they are not alone. With that confidence, they take the first step and then another. Before they know it, They're moving forward with a security they never thought possible. That's how God works. His help doesn't just push us forward. It transforms how we face our challenges. He reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it, because we know His hand is holding us. So, when fear tries to stop you, remember this promise and repeat the words of Isaiah 41:13. Hold on to them as if your life depended on them, because in a way it does. And every time you feel insecure, visualize His hand in yours. No matter how dark the path may seem, His light will always guide you. He is with you. Do not fear. He will help you. 2. God, our refuge and strength in times of distress. When we hear the words from Psalm 46, it's like a wave of calm embraces us. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. What a powerful statement, don't you think? This verse is not just ancient poetry, it's a living truth, a promise that still resonates amid life's storms. And let's face it, we all encounter storms. Life can be cruel and unpredictable, but here's the comfort. God, the creator of the universe, is also our refuge, our safe place. Imagine a shelter in the middle of a storm, a place where the rain can't reach you, where the wind doesn't overwhelm you. That's what God is for us. He doesn't promise there won't be storms, but He promises He will be there with us as our refuge. Not only that, He gives us strength, because let's be honest, there are times when we feel weak, when we don't have the strength to carry on. But in our weakness, His power is perfected. It's like He's saying, you don't need to be strong on your own. I will be your strength. Have you ever noticed how tribulations seem to come in waves, one after the other? We feel overwhelmed, like there's no escape. But here's the beauty of it. God is not a distant or inaccessible refuge. He is our very present help. His aid is not delayed or indifferent. It's immediate, timely, and perfect. Even when we feel completely alone, He's there, ready to intervene. And that changes everything, doesn't it? Knowing we're not alone in our crises. Think about this. There are moments in life when everything seems to be falling apart. Maybe it's an unexpected illness, a financial loss, or even a relationship that seemed indestructible, but suddenly breaks. It's easy to feel like the whole world is collapsing. But Psalm 46 reminds us of a key truth. Though the mountains may shake and the seas roar, God is still our refuge. He doesn't change. He doesn't move. He is firm. Let me share a story. Imagine someone facing a devastating financial crisis. Every day is a struggle to put food on the table, and the creditor's calls never stop. It's easy to feel desperate, right? This person, exhausted, decides to open their Bible one night and reads this psalm. At first, the words seem distant, but as they reflect on them, they begin to visualize God as a real refuge, a fortress they can enter. It's like they're stepping into something unshakable. They begin to feel something change inside. It's not that the problems disappear instantly, but there's a peace they didn't have before. A renewed strength to face one more day, trusting that God is in control. That's what God does. He doesn't just protect us, He transforms us from the inside. He gives us a peace that can't be explained, a peace that goes beyond our circumstances. And that peace allows us to walk with courage, even when we don't see the end of the tunnel. So, if today you feel worn out, if you feel life is hitting you harder than you can bear, remember this. God is your refuge. Run to Him. Talk to Him. Tell Him what you're feeling, what worries you. Because He doesn't just listen, He responds. And no matter how big the storm, His refuge is always stronger. His strength is always enough. Trust in Him. He is your very present help, even now. 3. Don't worry about tomorrow. Trust in God's provision. Have you ever noticed how much time we spend worrying? Jesus knew this, which is why, in the Sermon on the Mount, He gave us such a direct and liberating teaching. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? It's like Jesus is sitting right in front of us saying, relax, life is bigger than all those worries. The truth is, we've all been there, feeling that anxiety when the numbers don't add up, when the future seems uncertain, when you're not sure if you'll have enough to get through. And it's not that these worries aren't important, they're real. But Jesus invites us to look beyond the immediate, to remember that our lives have a much greater purpose than simply accumulating things or solving every problem on our own. Do you know what's the most amazing thing? Jesus points out something so basic yet so profound. The birds don't work, they don't sow or reap, but your Heavenly Father feeds them. Then he asks us a question that changes our perspective. Are you not much more valuable than they? Of course we are. If God cares for every bird and clothes the fields with beauty, how much more will he care for you? Think about that for a moment. You are his child and he knows you. He knows exactly what you need. And here's the uncomfortable but necessary truth. Worrying changes nothing. Jesus makes it clear, which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? It's like trying to solve a problem by thinking about it over and over again. It doesn't work. Worrying drains us. It steals our peace. It takes away the joy of the present. How many beautiful moments have we missed because our minds were trapped in the what-ifs of tomorrow? Jesus isn't saying we should ignore our responsibilities. What he invites us to do is trust, to shift our perspective, to seek first the kingdom of God. And that doesn't mean living with our heads in the clouds. It means focusing our lives on what truly matters, our relationship with him, loving others, walking in his purpose. When we do this, something wonderful happens. Things begin to fall into place. Not always the way we expect, but always the way we need. Let me tell you something. Imagine someone facing a tough financial situation. Bills are piling up, income is not enough, and stress is constant. This person, exhausted, decides to open the Bible one night and comes across this passage in Matthew. At first it's hard to believe, but little by little they begin to reflect. What if I just put this in God's hands? What if I trust that he will provide? They decide to try it. Instead of worrying, they start being thankful for what they have, focusing on helping others, and looking for ways to honor God with what little they have. And you know what happens? There's no instant miracle, but something profound begins to take place. This person starts to feel peace, and little by little things change. An unexpected job opportunity comes. Someone offers help. An opportunity appears out of nowhere, not because worrying solved anything, but because trusting God opens doors that anxiety closes. This is what Jesus wants for us, a life free from the weight of worry, full of trust in his love and provision. So today, let go of that burden. Look at the birds. See how God cares for everything he created. And remember, you are his beloved child. He knows what you need, and he will always be there for you. Don't worry about tomorrow. Trust in the God who is already there waiting for you with everything you need. 4. God will supply all your needs. Trust in his riches in glory. Have you ever felt worried about not having enough? That feeling of looking at your resources and thinking they won't stretch far enough? It's a weight that many of us carry at some point, right? But let me remind you of something. Philippians 4:19 says, "And my God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus." Not some of your needs, not just a few, all of them. Every shortfall, every lack, everything that makes you feel anxious is covered by God's riches. That's powerful. Paul wrote these words while thanking the church in Philippi for their generosity. He knew what it was like to live in abundance and in need. He had experienced both extremes, and yet he was absolutely convinced that God was faithful, not because everything was always easy, but because he had seen God's hand providing again and again. Paul wasn't speaking from theory, he was speaking from experience. And here's the key. When Paul says, "My God will supply all your needs," he's not saying that everything we want will be provided. He's talking about our real needs, those that we sometimes can't even express properly. God knows exactly what we need, even before we ask, and His provision doesn't depend on our situation, how much we have, or what's going on around us. It depends on His riches in glory, and His riches are limitless. Think about it. God, the creator of the universe, the owner of everything that exists, is not limited by our circumstances. He's not bound by economic systems, recessions, or human limitations. His glory, His abundance are infinite, and the most incredible thing, these riches are available to us through Christ Jesus. Jesus is our bridge, our access to those blessings. That's why our relationship with Him is so important. He is the means by which God's promises come to us. God will supply all your needs. Trust in His riches in glory. Continued. Now, it's not just about waiting for God to give us everything while we cross our arms. It's about living with confidence, believing that He is working on our behalf, even when we don't see it. That faith frees us from anxiety and allows us to rest in His faithfulness. And something else, expressing gratitude. How often do we take our daily blessings for granted? Thanking God not only strengthens our relationship with Him, but it also shifts our perspective. It helps us see His hand, even in the smallest details. Let me share something with you. Imagine someone struggling to make ends meet. The bills keep piling up, and the resources seem insufficient. This person, exhausted and unsure what to do, decides to pray, pouring out their situation to God, remembering the words of Philippians 4:19. At first, nothing seems to change, but over time, unexpected things start happening. A friend offers assistance. A job opportunity arises. Doors that seemed locked begin to open. It's not because that person clung to fear, but because they chose to trust God. They let go of their anxiety and trusted that God would provide. That's the invitation God gives us today. Trust that He will provide. Not always the way we expect, but always in the way we need. His timing is perfect, and His love for us is unshakable. He is not only willing to supply our needs, He is committed to doing so because we are His children, and He will never leave us. So if today you are facing a need, remember this promise: God will supply all that you lack. Give your worries to Him. Trust in His faithfulness and live with the certainty that His riches in glory are more than enough to cover every area of your life, because He is a loving Father, faithful and always working for your good. 5. Trust in God with all your heart, and He will guide your steps. Have you stopped to think about how complicated we make life sometimes? We want to control everything, decide everything, understand everything. But when things don't turn out the way we expect, we get frustrated. And that's when Proverbs 3:5 hits us like a loving reminder. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. It's such a direct piece of advice, yet so challenging, because trusting fully in God isn't always easy, right? We have this tendency to want to fix things ourselves. We think, I can handle this, or I already know what to do. But let's be honest, our understanding is limited. We don't see the whole picture. Sometimes what seems logical in the moment leads us down paths that turn out to be more complicated than necessary. And it's not that our abilities or reasoning are bad. God gave us a mind to use. But Proverbs tells us something clear. Don't just rely on that. because relying only on our logic and strength can trap us in a cycle of mistakes and disappointments. Trusting in the Lord with all your heart means surrendering everything, not just the big things, but the little things too. It's saying, Lord, here is my life, my plans, my dreams, my fears. Take them and do what you know is best. And let me tell you something, when we do that, God always responds. He doesn't leave us alone. But here's the key. It's not just about saying, I trust God. It's about living it. It's about inviting Him into every area of our lives, from the smallest decisions, like how to deal with a tough day, to the big ones, like choosing a career, a job, or a partner. God wants to be part of all of that. And then comes the promise. What a beautiful promise. He will make your paths straight. That doesn't mean everything will be easy or perfect, but it does mean He will guide you in the right direction. It's like God is saying, I know where I want to take you. I know the plan I have for you. Let me guide you. And when we let Him, we avoid so many mistakes and unnecessary detours. Trust in God with all your heart, and He will guide your steps. Continued. Let me share a story with you. Imagine someone facing a crucial decision. They don't know which path to take, and the uncertainty weighs them down for days. They analyze every option, but the more they think about it, the more confused they feel. One night, exhausted by the uncertainty, they decide to pray. They open their Bible and read Proverbs. Something changes inside them. They decide to trust God, to stop relying only on their own understanding, and to seek His guidance in prayer. Instead of continuing to dwell on the decision, they hand it over to God and wait with faith. And what happens? Slowly, things begin to clear up. Not because everything is suddenly perfect, but because God starts to open doors and close others. They feel a peace they didn't have before because they know they're no longer walking alone. God is guiding their steps. This is the promise that Proverbs offers us. A life directed by the infinite wisdom of God, not our limited perspective. When we trust in God, not only do we find direction, but we also find peace. Because when we know that the God of the universe is in control, there's no room for anxiety or fear. He knows the way better than we do. So today, take a moment to ask yourself, in which areas of my life do I need to stop depending only on myself and start trusting more in God? Acknowledge Him in all your ways and let Him show you the way. Because His plan for you will always be better than what you could imagine. 6. Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. Sometimes life feels like we're carrying a backpack full of stones. Every problem, every worry, every pain adds more weight, and eventually we feel like we can't carry it anymore. Have you been there? We've all had moments like that, but Psalm 55:22 offers us a simple yet powerful solution that we often forget. Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. This is more than just a nice phrase. It's an action, a deliberate act. It means taking all those concerns, the anxiety about work, family problems, the fear of the future, and literally handing them over to God. But how do we do that? Through prayer, talking to God honestly and saying, Lord, I can't handle this anymore. This is too much for me. I give it to you. And in that moment, something happens. It's not that our problems magically disappear, but the weight we felt begins to lift because we're no longer carrying it alone. That requires humility, right? Recognizing that we can't do it on our own isn't easy. We want control. We want to handle things our way. But God reminds us that His strength is made perfect in our weakness. He doesn't expect us to be strong all the time. In fact, He invites us to lean on His strength. When we acknowledge that we can't do it, we give God the opportunity to show us that He can. And He doesn't just lighten the load, He sustains us. That word sustain is rich with meaning. It speaks of continuous support, of someone holding us up so we don't fall. God doesn't just give us a little push and leave us on our own. He is with us every step, ensuring that we keep moving forward. His sustaining power is enough, even in the most difficult situations. When there seems to be no way out, His presence and peace are all we need. 7. God works all things for good. There are times in life when everything seems to go wrong, unexpected losses, closed doors, dreams that fall apart. We look up at the sky asking, "Why, God? Why me?" And in those moments, Romans 8:28 gives us a truth that, although hard to grasp sometimes, holds us steady. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This isn't just a hopeful wish, it's a certainty. It doesn't say some things, or only the good things work for our good. It says all things, even the most difficult, painful, and confusing experiences are being used by God to fulfill His purpose in our lives. But let's be honest, when we're in the middle of a storm, it's hard to see the good. It's easy to think that our circumstances are out of control, that somehow God has forgotten us. But this verse reminds us that God is always working, even when it seems like a disaster. He's not just a bystander. He's in the details, shaping, transforming, and using even the darkest moments to accomplish His purpose in us. Think about it. Paul doesn't say, "We hope all things work for good." He says, "We know." It's a certainty, a deep trust, that even when we don't understand what's happening, we can rest in the fact that God is in control. Now, this verse doesn't mean that God causes all the bad things that happen to us. He is not the author of evil, but here's the beauty of it. He can take even the most painful situations and transform them for our good. It's like a potter shaping a piece of clay. Every trial, every tear, every moment of uncertainty is being used for something greater, something eternal. God works all things for good. Continued. Think about this. Imagine someone who just lost their job. They feel devastated, unsure how they will provide for their family. Everything seems dark. But in the midst of their pain, they decide to surrender the situation to God. They pray, asking for His guidance. Even though they don't understand why this is happening, they trust that God is working in the middle of the mess, even though it's hard to see. Over time, they begin to see new doors opening. They find a job they never would have considered, one that not only meets their financial needs, but also gives them a renewed sense of purpose. This is how God works. Not always in the way we expect, but always for our good. He's molding us, shaping us, and preparing us for something better. So, when you find yourself in the middle of a storm, instead of asking, "Why me?" start asking, "What is God teaching me through this?" Because when we trust in His purpose, we can find peace, knowing that even in the hardest moments, God is working for our good. 8. Cast all your anxiety on God. He cares for you. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by your worries that it feels like you can't breathe? Anxiety has a way of stealing our peace, of filling every corner of our mind with questions like, "What will I do? How will I get through this?" But here's the hope. 1 Peter 5:7 offers us an invitation that can change everything. It says, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." It's like God is saying, "Let me help you. You weren't meant to carry this burden on your own." The first thing that stands out is the word all. God doesn't ask us to give Him only the big worries or those that seem worthy of His attention. He wants us to cast everything on Him, every fear, every worry, every thought that keeps us up at night, from the major life questions to the small stresses of everyday life. Because what's important to you is important to God. And here's the challenge. Letting go isn't easy, is it? We're so used to trying to solve things on our own. We want control. We want to find solutions. But that illusion of control is what keeps us stuck in cycles of anxiety. Casting our cares on God means surrendering them, saying, "Lord, here they are. I can't handle this, but I know you can." It's an act of faith, but also of humility. It's admitting that we can't, but He can. And why can we trust him with this? Because the verse gives us the reason he cares for you. Think about that. God cares for you, not in a distant or general way, but personally. He knows your struggles, your fears, your tears, and he's not indifferent. His care is constant, loving, and detailed. He doesn't forget you. Every part of your life is in his hands. 9. Be strong and courageous. God is with you wherever you go. There are moments in life when we feel totally overwhelmed by what lies ahead. Maybe you're facing an unexpected change, a difficult decision, or a challenge that seems impossible. And the first thing we feel is fear, right? That internal voice that says, I can't handle this. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? But in those moments, God reminds us of something incredible. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. This isn't just any advice, it's a command filled with love. It's an invitation to walk with faith and confidence because we are not alone. Think about Joshua after the death of Moses. He had to take on the responsibility of leading the people of Israel into the promised land. Can you imagine the weight of that task? He was filled with uncertainty, surrounded by challenges and under the pressure of not failing. But God didn't just give him a task. He gave him a promise. I will be with you. And that promise is not just for Joshua, it's for you and for me too. No matter what challenge we face, no matter how big the mountain seems, God is with us. He doesn't tell us not to fear because it's bad, but because he is there, holding us. He knows that fear is a natural response, but he's asking us not to let fear paralyze us. Being courageous doesn't mean not being afraid. It means moving forward in spite of it, because we know that his presence is with us. You don't have to find courage within yourself. The source of your strength is God. He doesn't just tell you to be brave. He gives you the reasons to be, his constant presence, his guidance, his support. He doesn't leave you to face challenges on your own. When God says, be strong and courageous, he's also giving you the strength to do it. Be strong and courageous. God is with you wherever you go. Continued. Let me share an example with you. Imagine someone who is about to move to a new city. The unknowns overwhelm them, the anxiety of leaving their family behind, starting from scratch and facing the unexpected. But they choose to hold on to Joshua 1. They pray, seeking strength from God, and despite their fears, they take that first step. As they move forward, they begin to notice how God opens doors for them. They find peace amidst the uncertainty. People come into their lives, opportunities arise, and little by little they see how God is leading them to places they never thought possible. This is how God works. When you choose to trust him and take bold steps, he walks with you. His presence goes before you, behind you, and alongside you. He's not just a passive observer. He's actively involved in every step you take. So if today you are facing something big, something scary, remember this promise. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. 10. God listens and delivers, seeking the Lord in our fears. Fear is something we all deal with at some point in our lives. It might be the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, or the fear of losing what we have. Sometimes that fear feels so real and so big that it paralyzes us, keeping us from moving forward. But in the midst of those struggles, Psalm 34 offers us a life-changing truth. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. This isn't just a comforting thought, it's a promise that God hears us, that he listens to every word, even the ones we can't find the courage to say. When we come to God with our fears, he doesn't ignore us, he responds. His answer might not always be what we expect, but he always responds with what's best for us. And notice that it says all our fears. God has the power to deliver us from everything that holds us back, everything that keeps us from living in the fullness of His peace. The first step in this process is seeking the Lord. Seeking Him isn't a passive thing, it's a decision. It's an intentional act. It's saying, in the midst of my fears, I will turn to God. I will bring my worries to Him. Sometimes that means kneeling in prayer, opening our hearts to Him, or diving into His Word to remind ourselves of His promises. Other times it might mean praising Him, even when we don't fully understand what's happening around us. And here's the beautiful part: God hears us. Have you ever felt like your words are lost in the air, like no one really understands what you're going through? With God, that's never the case. He hears every word, every whisper, even the things we can't express. His ear is always inclined toward us, listening to our deepest fears. And He doesn't just listen, He delivers us from them. When God delivers us, He doesn't just address the external situations, He also breaks the chains of fear that hold us captive. He frees us from the voices in our minds that say we're not enough, that we won't make it. He brings peace that goes beyond understanding, the kind of peace that allows us to breathe deeply and say, it's okay. God has this under control. 11. The peace only Jesus can give. There are times when life feels like a chaotic storm. Problems come one after another. Worries keep us awake at night, and that overwhelming sense of anxiety feels endless. Have you been there? Jesus knew that life would be filled with such moments. That's why, before going to the cross, He left His disciples a promise that is also for you and me. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. These aren't just empty words. This is a gift that can transform our lives if we choose to accept it. Jesus says, my peace I give you. Not just any peace, but a peace that is deep, genuine, and independent of our circumstances. The peace the world offers is fleeting and fragile, depending on everything going right. But the peace of Jesus is different. It's the kind of peace that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, He is with us, that His love, power, and plan for our lives will never fail. But here's the challenge. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Jesus doesn't say that fear or anxiety won't come. He knows they will. What He invites us to do is not let them rule our hearts. Because when fear takes control, it paralyzes us. It steals our joy, our hope, and keeps us from the truth that God is in control. Jesus calls us to rest in His peace, to trust in His presence, and to live in the freedom that comes from knowing He has already won the victory, the peace only Jesus can give, continued. Living in that peace is a decision. It's not something that happens automatically. Every day we have to choose to trust in Jesus, even when anxiety hits us. We choose to pray when stress tries to take over. We choose to surrender our burdens to Him instead of carrying them on our own. We choose to rest in His promises, knowing that He will never leave us nor forsake us. Imagine someone who is dealing with family issues and work stress. Every day feels like a battle, and anxiety seems to steal their peace. But one day, they stop. They read Jesus' words in John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. And something begins to shift. They take a moment to pray, saying, Jesus, I need your peace. I can't do this on my own. As they pray, a calmness that they haven't felt before starts to settle over them. It's not that their problems disappeared, but now they are able to face them with a sense of tranquility and clarity, knowing that Jesus is walking with them through it all. That's the peace that Jesus offers us, a peace that transcends our circumstances. It doesn't mean everything will be perfect, but it means that even in the chaos, we can experience the calm of knowing that we are never alone. So when fear or anxiety comes knocking, remember these words, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Let this promise be your refuge. Seek Jesus, talk to him, and allow his peace to fill every corner of your heart. Because that peace is not like the world's. It's eternal, real, and available to you right now. 12. Perfect peace for those who trust in God. Perfect peace sounds like a beautiful concept, but in a world filled with uncertainty, it sometimes feels impossible, doesn't it? The news is overwhelming. Personal challenges seem never-ending, and it feels like there's always something to worry about. But Isaiah 26:3 gives us a promise that can change everything. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Notice that it says perfect peace, not just any peace, but a peace that is complete, unshakable, and constant. And this peace doesn't depend on our circumstances. It depends on where we choose to focus our minds. When we set our thoughts on God, when we meditate on his character, his love, and his promises, something inside us shifts. Our minds go from being consumed with worry to being anchored in his truth. And when our minds are steadfast, when we choose to trust in him, he promises us perfect peace. But here's the key: this peace doesn't come by accident. It requires intentionality. It's easy to let our minds drift into worry, to focus on the problems and what could go wrong. But Isaiah reminds us that when we choose to focus on God, we find peace. This peace doesn't depend on how our situations turn out. It depends on our trust in God's sovereignty and his plan for our lives. Let me share an example. Imagine someone who is constantly worried about the future. Every negative news story feels like confirmation that things are going wrong. Their mind is filled with what-ifs, and they can never find rest. But one day they read Isaiah 26:3 and begin to meditate on it. Slowly, they start shifting their thoughts. Instead of focusing on the uncertainty, they begin to focus on God's faithfulness. They remind themselves that God is in control and that his plan for their life is good. As they do this, they begin to feel a peace that they haven't felt before. It's not that everything is suddenly perfect, but their mind is no longer dominated by fear. They know that God has everything under control. 13. The Lord, our helper, our hope comes from God. Have you ever felt stuck, like you don't know which way to go or how to move forward? That moment when you look around and all you see are mountains of problems that seem impossible to overcome. Psalm 121 speaks directly to that moment. It offers a promise that changes everything. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. These words are like an anchor for the soul. They remind us that our help doesn't come from our own strength, from our own understanding, or from our own resources. Our help comes from the Lord, the one who created everything. He is the source of all our strength and all our help. And when we focus on him, when we lift our eyes to him, instead of the obstacles in front of us, our perspective changes. The mountains that once seemed insurmountable are suddenly seen in light of God's power and sovereignty. For the travelers in the psalm, the hills represented both obstacles and places of refuge. In the same way, in our lives, the challenges can feel like insurmountable mountains. But we are reminded to look to God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. If he can create all that we see, then he is more than capable of helping us through any situation. When we choose to look up instead of down at our problems, we realize that we are not alone. God is with us. His help is constant, and he is the one who will guide us through. The verse doesn't stop there. It reminds us that God is not just any helper. He is the creator of everything. If he can hold the stars in place, he can surely help us with our challenges. So no matter what you're facing today, remember this: your help comes from the Lord, and there is no problem too big for him. The Lord, our helper, our hope comes from God. Continued. Imagine someone standing at a crossroads in life, unsure which direction to take. They're overwhelmed by the weight of the decisions ahead, and anxiety fills their mind. They feel paralyzed, unable to move forward. But one day, they read Psalm 121, 1-2. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Something changes in their heart. They begin to shift their perspective, looking up instead of focusing on their fears. They realize that the creator of the universe is on their side, guiding them. The anxiety starts to fade as they recognize that they don't have to carry this burden alone. God is with them, ready to help them take the next step. And slowly, the fear and confusion begin to lift. The path forward becomes clearer, not because the obstacles disappeared, but because their eyes are fixed on God, the one who has the power to lead them through it. This is what God promises in Psalm 121. He will not leave us to face life's challenges on our own. When we lift our eyes to Him, we gain a new perspective. The Creator of the heavens and the earth is our helper. He is our strength. He is our hope. 14. Finding rest in Jesus, an invitation to the weary and burdened. Fatigue, the kind that reaches deep into our souls, is something everyone experiences. It's not just physical exhaustion, it's the emotional and spiritual weariness that comes from life's responsibilities, expectations, and constant demands. Have you ever felt that kind of weariness? The burden of trying to meet everyone's expectations, juggling your responsibilities and feeling like you're carrying the weight of the world. In the midst of that exhaustion, Jesus offers us a profound invitation. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. This is not a suggestion, it's a direct call. Jesus doesn't say, if you feel tired, try to rest. He says, come to me and I will give you rest. And not just any rest, but rest for your soul. To accept this invitation, we must first recognize that we can't do it all on our own. Admitting that we are weary, that we are burdened, takes humility. But when we come to Jesus just as we are, He meets us there. He offers us His peace and His rest. This doesn't mean that all of life's problems disappear immediately, but it does mean that when we are in Jesus, we find a place of refuge. His rest isn't just about physical sleep. It's a peace that calms our hearts and refreshes our souls. Imagine someone who has been running tirelessly for days, feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. They finally stop and sit down and they hear Jesus say, come to me and I will give you rest. They take a deep breath, knowing that they don't have to carry their burdens alone anymore. The peace of Jesus surrounds them and they feel the weight lift. This is the rest that Jesus offers, a rest that goes beyond the temporary relief we get from sleep or distractions. It's a deep, soul-restoring peace that only He can provide. So if you are tired, burdened, or feeling overwhelmed, come to Jesus, lay down your worries, and rest in His love. 15. God will never leave you. Trust in His constant presence. Have you ever felt abandoned, like no one was there for you, or like you were walking through life's struggles alone? Sometimes people fail us, circumstances change, and we are left wondering who will stand by our side when things get tough. But Hebrews 13:5 gives us a powerful promise. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. These are not empty words. God, in His infinite faithfulness, promises that He will never abandon us. No matter what happens, no matter how difficult the journey gets, He will be with us. This promise is the foundation of our confidence. It means that no matter how many times we stumble or how many times we fail, God is always there, ready to pick us up and walk with us. His love is constant. His presence is unchanging. This promise also reminds us that even when we feel alone, we are not. When life gets hard, when everything seems to be falling apart, we can rest in the fact that God is with us. He is our helper. He is our refuge, and He will never leave us. Think about this, someone who feels abandoned, who faces life's challenges with no one to turn to, suddenly remembers this promise: never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. It's not just comforting, it's life-changing. They realize that even in their darkest moments, they are not truly alone. God is there, walking beside them, offering them His strength, His guidance, and His love. Conclusion: trusting in God's promises. Throughout this journey, we have seen how God invites us to trust in Him. He is greater than any obstacle we face, and He promises to be with us every step of the way. By shifting our focus from our problems to His greatness, we find peace, strength, and hope. We don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We can trust that God is actively involved in our lives, working all things for our good. He is our refuge, our strength, and our ever-present help. As you continue your journey, remember these promises. Let them anchor your heart and guide your steps. When life gets overwhelming, when fear tries to take over, look to God. He is with you. He will never leave you, and in Him you will find everything you need. Thank you for joining me on this journey of trust and faith in God. If this message has impacted you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to leave a comment with your declaration of trust. I trust in God. He will resolve everything. Together we can strengthen our faith and walk confidently, knowing that with God on our side, no problem is too big.